So Israel Adesanya or Boatan, that's the debate about who's got the better all-time MMA legacy, not just in a pound-for-pound capacity, but divisional as well. So for you, how do you feel? Who have you got ahead?
If I'm honest, leading into the Ankalaev fight, I had Alex up comfortably, or maybe not comfortably, but I would have been happy to say Alex.
Okay,
After the loss, I say Alex by a very small amount,
sure.
but I could see an argument for 50-50, but I personally don't see the argument yet for Adesanya. What about you?
As a better than Alex
All time.
all time, pound for pound. I think if you look at longevity, Adesanya went through obstacles like specific styles that Boatan didn't on the way up. So, for example, Boatan never went through the Robert Whitakers of this world, the Romeros of this world, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialists on the ground, and elite level guys who can weaponize that element of their game in the way that Izzy did. He fended off a number of different styles in that sense, whereas Alex didn't. But with that said, I would mention that while Alex didn't have as many styles, because of the way he was fast tracked, he was also accelerating at speed that Adesanya wasn't. You know, he was going at 200 miles an hour. Adesanya was being shot out of a cannon at 100 miles an hour, but taking on all these different Rubik's Cubes along the way. Alex had one style of fighting in front of him, but he was being accelerated at 200 miles an hour. And if you look at it, Alex was able to penetrate the ceiling that Izzy couldn't. Izzy went to 205 once, he lost, and he never returned to the scene of the crime. Boatan didn't. So how big a factor do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot of those are good points. I'll make my case for why I think Alex is over time, and then we can start to kind of maybe go across
Yeah.
both points. I think so. I agree with everything, especially about the come up with Alex. Obviously, he had that Greek fighter. I always forget his name. First fight.
Michailidis.
Then he got Bruno Silva, which is a good fight. He went through Bruno pretty easily, but he was looking a bit suspect. So at that point, I agree. If at that point you give him a Roman Dolidze or a Marvin Vittori or a Robert Whittaker at that point, yeah, I would have also picked him to lose, probably.
Yeah.
With that said, the Sean Strickland fight, in terms of, I would say, the only defense I have for Alex in that way is, in terms of earning a title fight,
Yeah.
Sean is a pretty good win to have in order to earn the title fight, but I agree there's a gap between Bruno and Sean that he never had to go through, whereas Adesanya had to go through like Travares and Vittori and all these other guys. So I agree. My case for making Alex all time, however, is based on the fact that it depends on how much you kind of cachet you give to the two divisions. I give a lot. Obviously, I can hear the case for not. As in, if you said 6 defenses, that's way more impressive than just 2 championships. But if you have 2 championships and defenses like Alex does, I, on that point, start to lean towards Alex, because when you beat Adesanya, that's not enough to take over Adesanya. Then he lost Adesanya, and he never defended his belt. However, when he beat Jiri, that was his 4th champion at the time, because at that point he had faced, no, that was his 3rd champion, because he had faced Adesanya, Sean Strickland, and Blachowicz. So by the time he beat Jiri, he became a 2-time champion.
Yeah.
He's beaten 4 champions, and when he beat Jiri, obviously followed up with 3 defenses.
Yeah.
I think the 3rd defense puts him ahead.
The third puts him ahead in that sense. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that common denominator, right? Very good names, but all strikers. Jan Blachowicz, Jamal Hill, Yuri, all strikers in that sense. Now, Ankalaev is a striker who, that's the basis of his style, but because he has a significant enough degree of Sambo style wrestling behind him, that presented a unique problem for Alex. But Alex did something that Izzy wasn't able to do. And Alex arguably had the tougher assignment in this sense. Alex was fighting the hands. He was also reversing a number of the attempted takedowns, and Ankalaev wasn't able to take him down once. Jan Blachowicz took Izzy down along the fence line and in the center of the cage. Now, Adesanya's historically had very good takedown defense up against the fence line. And the cage it's a little bit, in the center of the octagon, it's a little bit different. With Alex, he resisted all those takedown attempts. And when you look at it, Jan Blachowicz isn't exactly a bigger wrestling threat or more potent in his wrestling than someone like Ankalaev is, because at the end of the day, they're still both strikers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, well, at this point, I think you're helping me make my case because...
Yeah, I am. I'm playing both sides.
With Adesanya, I agree he took on more different types of opponents. But, so, the flip side of this is, and this is my issue when he was on the come-up with like a lot of his fan base, which is, his fan base makes this point that he was fighting Marvin Vettori and Rob, that these wrestlers. He's fighting Marvin Vettori and Rob.
Yeah.
That were good wrestlers in comparison to what was a pretty horrible division in terms of grappling. Because at that point, Weidman had kind of been wiped out. Jacare was on the way out. He missed the actual wrestling threats. Chael Sonnen, he was obviously gone like 5-6 years already.
Yeah.
But he had missed the actual threats that would have given him problems. I think Marvin, all these are very good wins. I give respect. And he actually had a pretty tough way up. And he beat Kelvin Gastelum in a good fight. So he earned his title fight and everything. But I don't think his wins are as diverse or as impressive as people make them out. They are impressive. And obviously they're more, he had to go through more to get his initial title shot. So that I agree. If this conversation was in 2022 or even in 2023, I would have been on your side. My issue with the whole wrestling thing is, Alex at this point is as, maybe not as good as Adesanya, but almost as good as Adesanya when it comes to anti-grappling, because Ankalaev is pretty impressive. He was taking down Blachowicz. And I didn't think he ever got close to a takedown in that thing. Obviously, Alex's defensive positioning is like, in a way where he was a bit overly defensive in the Ankalaev fight, so it made it easier. So maybe on another night he gets taken down. But his wrestling defense is pretty good. Jiri was failing most of his takedowns. Blachowicz started missing most of his takedowns after the first round, apart from the last one that he landed. And obviously Ankalaev, he couldn't get anything. These other light heavyweights are not going to shoot. My thing is, I agree with the route to the top. That was harder for Adesanya. But when it comes to legacy is, you have to look at everything. And I think 3 defenses compared to Adesanya's, what is it, 5? Because he had Yoel, then Paulo Costa, then Robert Whittaker, Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier.
And Vettori again. He did it twice.
No, well, Vettori wasn't a defense. The first one. The first one was a 3-rounder on the way up.
Ah, I see. I thought you were talking about just wins after.
In Adesanya's defense, he does have more title wins.
Yes.
That because he beat Rob to win the title. He beat Alex to win the title. Whereas Alex only has 5 title wins, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5. So 5 versus 7, obviously you'd say 7. In terms of like diversity of opponents, again, you go with Adesanya. But I think the fact that he's done in 2 divisions, mostly finishes, and the fact that, and I want to get your thoughts on this, I think the fact that he's done it against more experienced names that were also champions helps his case, because he didn't do it against like obviously, let's say he beat Khalil Roundtree. Khalil Roundtree was the only opponent he's faced so far since he's moved to light heavyweight that hasn't been in a title fight. Every other opponent he faced in light heavyweight had been in a title fight. Blachowicz was a champion, Jiri was a champion.
Yeah.
He faced Jiri again, Jamal was a champion, and he faced Ankalaev, who was in a title fight. And he should have won it.
Yeah.
Against Blachowicz. So I think strength of legacy goes to Alex just because of the fact that he's done it in 2 divisions, and I think that third defense against Khalil just edges it to Alex. I think.
Well, I think there's 2 things I'd say in reply to that. The first being that you're absolutely right about the caliber of opposition. Because when you think about it, both at 185 and 205, Alex has beaten 5 current, former, or future world champions after he beat them. Sean Strickland went on to become a champion. Israel Adesanya, a current champion. Jamal Hill, a current champion, the first time he beat him for the belt, wasn't it?
No, he beat Jiri.
He was beat Yuri. Yuri, a current champion. Jamal, a former champion. And Jan Blachowicz, a former champion. Whether it's a current, future, or former, he beat 5 champions out of the 14 UFC fights he's had. That's less than 1 in 3, which leans heavily into your point of what you're saying about him having that much more of an accomplished resume. With that said, though, if we're going for name power, the likes of Silva, the likes of Whitaker, if you put Boatan's top 3 wins or top 5 wins against Izzy's top 5, just for name value, Romero in there as well, I think that based on name value, that leans heavily towards Adesanya in that respect. How do you feel?
So name Adesanya is best fight.
So name value, okay. Silva, Whitaker, Romero based on overall career accomplishments. I put him in there. Then I would say
Alex himself.
Alex. I was going to put him 5, but now you mention it, we'll go 4. I was going to say Badori, but then when you look at how his career's gone since, and even now losing recently, it's a bit... Because there's a pool of names, you've got your Cannoneers, you've got your other guys in that sort of remit, that it's hard to pinpoint a 5th in isolation, but for the purposes of the point, we can go with Badori, we can say him. We can say him as number 5. Or do you feel there's another...
Yeah, I would probably put Jared in front of Marvin, but then there's personal preference. I've never rated Marvin, so I'm a bit biased. Obviously I got proven right against Delitse, but I've personally never really seen him as like a threat. But that's fair. I think when it comes to Alex, obviously Adesanya's up there. Maybe Adesanya.
Yeah.
I'd say Blachowicz. I rate Blachowicz very highly. I know he has like I think he has 1 defense, and then he lost to Glover. That's fine. But I actually have rated him very high for a long time. I would put him in there. Sean Strickland, just given his overall career, not now maybe, right now he doesn't look great, but Sean's still a very impressive fighter. Jiri, especially since you see the Jamal fight, it's another name in Jiri's thing. It just I think that actually helps Jiri's case. And then the 5th one, Sean, Izzy, Blachowicz, Jiri,
Hill.
And you would have to say Hill just because he's a champion. I personally, like you, I don't consider Hill like some all-time great, but I would think mine, skill-wise, on better than yours maybe, but I think legacy-wise mine are higher. Like my list is higher, I would say, in terms of what they've done in the sport is better. Even if I see Yoel as like a better fighter than a Jiri or Rob. The Rob win is very impressive. I would have Rob as maybe like the premier wins from both of them.
So if you want to look at it on a cumulative basis, based on name value, who would you say is Boatan's biggest win? Adesanya?
That's a good question. On name value, of course, yeah. In terms of the level of difficulty, I would actually give it to Blachowicz. I did not think he'd win that fight. But yeah, name value, of course.
Name value. So if you compare them 1-to-1, so 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, all the way to 5, Silva or Adesanya?
Oh, Adesanya.
You feel Adesanya?
I have Adesanya very high on the list.
Whitaker or Blachowicz?
Oh, that's a good question, man. You have to say Robert. Yeah, you have to say Robert. Yeah.
Okay. Who's your number 3?
My number 3 was Jiri, I think. No, yeah, Sean, I said.
Sean. Romero or Sean?
Go Romero. No, oh man, I don't know.
The number 4.
Oh, sure.
Who's your 4th? I remember your list, but not the 4th.
Jiri.
Okay, 4th. Then Boatan or Yuri?
Well, Alex.
Okay, so 3-1 to Adesanya.
I would say I would leave Sean and Yoel. I love Yoel. Yoel was my favorite fighter of all time. So I'm biased, but I would have to say Sean is a more impressive way because he became champ.
Okay.
And Yoel could never do that. So I think that's 2-2 actually. That was me just being biased to Yoel. I would say Sean is a more impressive win.
Yeah.
And to finish him.
No. And just a disclaimer, by the way, because it's on Adil's channel, I'm just playing devil's advocate for the other side. It's not a case of me aligning with one or the other. And then number 5, who's your 5th?
My 5th one, I think I said Jamal.
Okay.
You said Marvin, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we lean, but it's very close. I would give that to Alex 3-2, but it is pretty close. It's a very impressive top 5 wins, very impressive. And
yeah.
I rate beating Rob very highly, and he beat Calvin,
So
and he beat Pereira. So I
pound for pound, do you think Silva is lower than Adesanya? Because most people would have.
Name-wise, I would probably have Alex I would have Adesanya slightly below, but given context of the win,
Well, no, this was strictly on name value. We did this list
name value.
because
Well,
if you ask most people about their top 5, and I know you don't agree with Khabib.
I'm going to be very honest. I'm trying to because I haven't posted to this channel that much, and I'm coming into the YouTube space properly.
Yeah.
I guess for the first time now. I'm like holding back my own personal opinions because people might think they're crazy. I do have.
No, say what you feel.
I do have a lot of knowledge
feel.
about MMA, and in my opinion, I actually have Adesanya higher all time. I think Adesanya and a lot of previous champions get away with low quality of opponents. Adesanya had to fight like in his 6th fight for the title, and he had to face Kelvin Gastelum in a title fight before he got his undisputed title shot. Adesanya's route to the belt has fighters in there that would have naturally been his defenses. Because Anderson's 2nd fight in the UFC was a title shot because the division was so skinny back then. Like there wasn't as many high level fighters. So I think a lot of his legacy is padded because I love Anderson so much, but I'm just saying if I had to choose between them two, I'd go Adesanya. Right. That's me.
No, I get you. I see what you're saying about the division being quite thin when Silva first turned up on the scene in that sense, but I think in terms of overall unanimously shared sentiments across MMA, John Jones, and then any permutation of GSP, Silva or Khabib tend to feature in most people's 2 or 3.
I agree.
And then afterwards you've got your list of whether it's Aldo, whether it's Cormier or whoever.
I agree.
So based on what's a unanimous sentiment, I would put Silva above. For the rest of the list, I think you're right in putting Battori below Jamal Hill. Sean Strickland, I don't believe, was a better fighter than Yoel.
But then saying what you said, all time people would have Sean higher.
In terms of
just
name
because
value,
he became champ, I think the champ thing puts him over the top. Plus, he's obviously in a time he's become quite famous because of his whole shtick.
Yeah,
talking and all that stuff.
He managed to cross that line and became a champion.
I think it's a good argument. I can see.
It's an interesting one. It's
an elite versus an elite list, obviously. So there's no disrespect to Adesanya's list there. I just think the fact that he's doing this list across 2 divisions.
Yeah.
Again, it's just putting him over the top.
Sure, but does it not spread it thin? You could argue, where if you bypass the likes of Whitaker's along the way, you bypass.
I agree.
Different styles.
100%. 100%. I'm with you. I just think it's when you say who's better all time, that's a different position. That's a different question as to who had it harder all time.
Yeah.
Or whose route was more impressive, or whose route to the title was more impressive.
Sure.
And we should even do a video on that because I think that would actually completely change the way people see certain fighters. Because like I just said, I think Adesanya's route to the title was way more difficult than Anderson's, but no one cares about that. When they think of Anderson, they think about all his defenses. They don't even care about the fact that his second fight, I think his second fight, I can't remember, the 2nd or 3rd, was a title shot. But Adesanya wasn't given that. And Alex was, ironically.
Yeah.
But if I had to make an argument of all time, more impressive resume and legacy, if they both retired today, obviously Alex could lose to Ankalaev again. If they retired today, I think Alex, just because of that 2 division thing, just a little bit. Just like 51% to Alex, I'd say. And the Imavov fight, by the way, we didn't discuss this.
Yeah.
How do you see him losing since then?
I think Adesanya's career will only go in one direction from here on now. I don't consider him a top 5 anymore in any division. That's something that, and I mentioned this earlier, Alex was able to not just penetrate the ceiling that was otherwise unavailable to Adesanya post Jan Blachowicz. He actually went one further and got multiple defenses.
Yeah.
He didn't just penetrate the ceiling at 205, 1, 2, 3 defenses after. And if you look at the proximity as well, the time frame, not a lot of time between them. This was a very chock-a-block sort of schedule in that sense. And so, in that respect, it arguably makes it more impressive for Alex. I would, however, say that, and I'm just forgetting what I was about to say. I would, however, say that if you look at the losses they've had, Alex lost to Izzy, and that was a lasting impression. that's how, because the kickboxing days, that's a separate discussion. This is strictly MMA capacity. But here's what I wanted to say. Adesanya had the success he did because he could leverage and weaponize a relative advantage in kickboxing over the rest of the division. He could do that against Whittaker. He could do that against the likes of Madvin. He could do that against everyone else. Had Boatan been there at the start, Adesanya wouldn't have had that run to exercise in a relative advantage relative to everyone else around him. He wouldn't have been able to weaponize it in that way. There was no equal in the division.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as there was, the rest of his MMA game, he couldn't rely on all that much because his gap in offensive wrestling with Alex's isn't that big, even despite all the experience. Where this leans into Alex particularly is the fact that Alex had 2 fights in 2016, his first MMA fights, then a 5-year gap, after which he fought in LFA for 1 fight. He then debuted in the UFC against Michailidis, he won. Then Strickland, then Adesanya. In his 7th mixed martial arts fight, he beat one of the top 15 MMA fighters of all time at the peak of his powers. Now, had Alex converted to MMA earlier and without a 5-year gap, had the LFA run been more extensive, this could have been a very different conversation. And I'd argue, had Alex been dealt the cards Izzy did in terms of progression and everything, there is a good chance he could actually have gone further and there wouldn't have been a debate in that sense. But how do you feel?
That's actually a very good question, or a very good point rather, because I think people just don't talk about the fact, and they do this with John, and when we have mutual friends where we talk to them and they make a lot of kind of no excuses, but they they bring up John's age and they bring up other people's age, but for some reason people just don't bring up the fact that Alex is a 38-year-old. Now he's not in a division where you age badly. If you're a 38-year-old lightweight, for example, that's horrible.
Yeah.
In light heavyweight, obviously you can be old and still be a champion, but he's at the end of his prime. He's definitely at the end of how much his chin can take. You saw him get stumbled against Ankalaev. It's obviously a good shot. He would probably have got stumbled anyway. But a lot of his prime years, for example, when he fought Adesanya the 4th time he got KO'd, he might just eat that 5 years earlier. So I agree. I actually think the same with Yoel Romero, where Yoel had a very impressive career. But it would have been way more impressive if he came into the UFC when he was 28. He came into the UFC, I think, when he was 35. Alex came into the UFC when I think he was 34. These are really advanced guys that have taken a lot of damage on their body, and Alex to the head. So I actually think, thing is with Alex, right? Because, okay, so there's 2 issues with that. So there's 2 things with that. One thing is I agree, obviously he would have been younger, more athletic, which allows him to have a longer run, and he might have had more defenses.
Yeah.
So I agree. However, I would say, and as much as I'm not a big Adesanya type of fan, on a personal level, professionally, as a fighter, I rate him really, really highly. And he's kind of the reason why Alex got his first belt. Because Alex probably signed when he did, with knowing that he's a champion. So Adesanya kind of paved the way for that guy. If it was the other way around, and Alex joins at the same time, that might not happen. Or if Alex joins and Adesanya doesn't, that might not happen. I think Alex fought knowing that there's a belief that I can beat this guy. He's done it, so I can beat these guys. And he's the champion, and I can beat him. So I think if Robert Whittaker's the champion, and Adesanya is still in glory, and he tries to make that run, he might not have made it. And he might have been beaten up and then thrown out the UFC. So you never know. I think Adesanya kind of made it easier for him, because 1, it gave him the belief, and 2, obviously it means that you can speed run him to the belt. If he had to face Roman Dolidze and Marvin Vettori, maybe he loses twice, then he gets 2, then he loses twice, then he gets 2 wins. So you never really know. Logically, you'd think he would do more. Maybe he'd be behind. Overall. So I don't know.
So how much debt of gratitude do you think that Alex owes Izzy, based on everything you've said?
I think Adesanya was in a position name-wise in 2022 where he could have said no to the fight. And I remember when he beat Jared Cannonier, that same night he beat Sean Strickland, and Alex was trying to push for the title fight, and they tried to push for it in the main event, not in the main event, the presser. But Adesanya was not in a position, I don't know if people remember, Adesanya was not in a position that he had to take that. You could have easily have said, no, you're a bum, you need to go fight other fighters. And people would have been okay with that. And I would have agreed with him. So I think almost, not all, obviously he's the one who's gone out and done it, but a good portion of his success is down to the decision that Adesanya made to give him the title shot. Because Adesanya knew there's nobody else who can really beat him at that time. Adesanya even said at that interview, like, you guys should be thanking me for taking this fight, because he would have walked through all of you. He knows that if he says no and Rob fights him, Rob probably beats him. Or if he says no and Marvin Vettori maybe faces him at that time, Marvin maybe beats him.
Yeah.
So I think Alex owes millions and like title defenses to Adesanya for even giving him that fight. What if Adesanya retires?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to fight.
Alex wouldn't have been accelerated through the UFC anywhere near to the same degree that we've seen had Adesanya not been there. So, in the same way that Conor McGregor was needed to turn Khabib's career to the level it was, not quite a like-for-like comparison, but there's enough of a parallel there
I would argue it's more.
You'd say it's more?
Because Khabib was so famous in the Muslim world, he wouldn't have been a global star or anything. But
Was he that famous in the Muslim world before Conor?
Yeah, as in he was as famous as any UFC fighter can be without being like a megastar.
I'd say Khamzat's more famous now amongst Muslims than Khabib was back then.
But that's also because he's coming after Khabib, isn't it? Like
That's
if Khabib
true.
wasn't around, Hamza wouldn't have been this big. I remember when Khabib used to fight in 2015, 2016, he was big. He was big. He was just never... And his Tony beef made him bigger. Conor just took him from like a star and made him like a global super duper star. Now he's like one of the most famous athletes in the world.
Yeah.
So Alex isn't that, obviously. He's not like some... Like, he's a star, but he's not like some like global superstar like Conor McGregor. But he owes his actual MMA career to him. I think he paved the way for him. Versus Khabib was going to still win and defend belts and do his thing without Conor.
Yeah.
Versus Alex might not. Alex might not have even been in the UFC if it wasn't for Adesanya. Because who says the UFC would even sign him if there isn't a potential for him to, because if he joins in 2013, maybe he doesn't get to the UFC. People don't realize how difficult it is actually at those lower levels, like at those, because if you join from another sport, it takes a long time to get acclimatized and have experience and stuff. He might not have naturally made the top five. He might have had a lot of tough fights. Like Bruno Silva, that's a tough fight. He could have got KO'd in that fight. He was losing the fight in his first bout in the UFC before he got the flying knee. So I respect Adesanya a lot. I think he owes a lot to him, but still comes back to the idea that if I had to rank them overall, if you retired them now, who would be higher all time? I think I would rank Alex somewhere between like 9 and 13 and Adesanya like 14, 15, if I'm honest.
I couldn't put either of them in my top 10.
Okay.
Izzy hit the ceiling. He went to 205 once, lost, and he never returned to the scene of the crime, either to avenge it outright or afterwards retrospectively, just have another bite at the cherry. In the case of Alex, he's never faced an elite outright wrestler, an elite outright Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter, and through only fighting strikers, irrespective of how impressive it is, across two weight divisions, getting through ceilings Adesanya couldn't. You can't be one of the greatest top 10 mixed martial artists without having faced mixed, I think how to speak English, forgets mixed martial artists without facing all the genres bar one. It's more like an unofficial extension of kickboxing in that sense. So, Alex...
Can I just cut you off?
Go for it. That's what we're here for. I'm here to be cut off. Go on.
We'll do this in another video. But then how do you have Khabib top 5 all time?
Because I think if you look at how bona fide those divisions were, that was a historically deep lightweight division with all these fighters at their prime, and in a pound for pound capacity, the pound for pound top 10 was saturated with lightweights at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Tony, Conor, Gagey, Poirier, and there was only one champion, and yet half of the pound for pound list was filled with them. They're also all-time pound for pound greats. Dustin Poirier, in the top 40, top 50 UFC fighters ever. He's there. Conor's there. And if you look at that division, and everyone that's come before, come after, when you see what the likes of Charles and Islam have done, they've looked human against Poirier. Charles got knocked down. Islam had his moments of panic as well. The way Khabib, in a sport like MMA, where, and Luke Thomas mentioned this, where the best practices are ever evolving, and it's a continuing evolving sport, to have not bled once, not one scratch, lost one round against multiple bona fide elite pound for pounds, and in some cases of all time, not just in that generation, that is one element. But if you look at Khabib's his skill set, he wasn't a striker, and he was doing this two strikers. Alex was a striker doing that two strikers. He was playing people at his own game. Khabib had to force strikers into his realm of MMA, whereas wrestlers would have happily obliged, and then it would have, in all likelihood, just forecasting hypothetically, been a case of Khabib looking to take guys on at his own game, to physically take fights away from the likes of Gagey, who flatly refused to let Tony Ferguson turn it into a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fight. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, they've weathered a number of different storms, and the degree of domination over those guys, and in that manner, for me, is what puts Khabib in that top five, because afterwards, no one has ever had a stranglehold over that division, and it was at its strongest when he was at the top, or during that period when he had his premiership. Since then, Dustin's older, more worse for wear. Justin's older, more worse for wear. Conor's been seen 3 times and will likely never be seen again in an MMA ring. That's where I come in.
I would say, throughout all of the points that you made good reasons for why him not actually fighting well-rounded opponents was okay. Because I think apart from maybe RDA, he never actually fought someone who's genuinely can really bring it in terms of the grappling. And I actually agree with you overall in terms of roundabout where he is. You might rank him 4th, I'll rank him 6th. It's relatively pretty close. I actually agree with explaining away why it's okay for him to be top 10 despite not having faced people who are varied and who have background in grappling. My point is actually to do with the fact that in the same way that you think his accomplishments are enough to explain that away, I think Alex's accomplishments are enough to explain his thing away. Does that make sense? Whereas I agree he hasn't faced as many high-level wrestlers. He never faced Jacare. He's not facing DC or John Jones or something in like heavyweight. I think he's done enough, given that in your example, he was doing it to people who were top 10, top 15 pound for pound. And in Alex's case, he's doing it to champions. I think if you do it enough to people who are great themselves, I think you can explain it away, which is why I explained Alex's away. I think with Khabib, I would make the point that he was dominant, but Alex has more championship fights than him, which is a pretty bad look for Khabib. He has 4 championship fights, and I would say the Justin Gaethje is a great fight. Justin was in his prime and he walked him. Dustin was in his prime and he walked him. But Conor was definitely not in his prime, and he did walk him, but he wasn't in his prime. And the championship fight that he had against Ida Quinta, that's like one of the worst championship wins ever in the history of the lightweight division. So I would say when it comes to Khabib and stuff, and we'll come on to this in a different video, but with Khabib, I think you have to remember he has very few things. If he was to lose his next fight, let's say to Charles, in a close fight, let's say, then he goes away and he faces like a younger man at the time and then gets KO'd, right? I'm not saying this would have happened, but he's 2 bad nights away from not even being in people's top 20 or top 25.
Such is the game of MMA.
And on that logic, I would say, even though it's by a thread, his run a little bit, Bruno, Sean, and all kind of magically lined up. Even when he faced, and I'm not making the case maybe Izzy, but when he was making his run, he did get Jiri coming off of an injury. He got Jamal coming off of an injury. He got Khalil, who's not really like I don't see him as an elite fighter. But that's how MMA is so harsh. He got Imavov, looked amazing, made one mistake, he's KO'd.
Yeah.
And it's just a savage sport. But yeah, now this is a good conversation. We could probably do it probably all day. But
No, of course.
I would say, if I had to be honest, I would probably rank Alex, like I said. You made a good reason for why he's probably not top 10, but probably 10 to 13, 11 to 13. I would have Adesanya 14, 15. That's where I would rank him all time. As a middleweight, obviously, it's not a comparison. But I would go with Alex overall. But yeah.
Sure. I mean, I see both sides to it. I'm just
What would you say if he beat Ankalaev in the rematch? Would that be the thing for you that tipped it? For him to go out and actually beat that guy?
if he goes and beats Ankalaev, I think because of the volume of styles as he's faced, if he beats one elite level wrestler or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, then I think it tilts the conversation Boatan's way. But to have only beaten or avenged strikers is an unofficial extension of kickboxing success. It's not mixed martial arts success.
But don't you think Ankalaev is a better grappler than anybody Izzy's beat? No, not that Alex hasn't beaten him either. Alex hasn't beaten him yet. But I'm saying if Alex beat him, he's probably been a better MMA grappler than anyone Izzy's beat.
I'm not sure about that personally.
Who do you think he has that's better than Ankalaev?
In pure grappling terms or MMA grappling? Okay. That's an
Obviously, Yoel would take that.
yeah.
But Yoel is my favorite fight of all time. But Yoel has the IQ of a banana because he didn't implement his MMA grappling enough at all. He faced Adesanya shot once. I think he shot twice maybe throughout 25 minutes. His MMA
They are
grappling
two
was not there.
counter punchers, to be fair. So stylistically, it was always destined to disappoint. Not quite to the extent of the horror show we saw.
But no, but my point is Yoel's MMA grappling was never implemented properly. He did it against Weidman for a round. He did it against Bruno Silva. Did it against another Bronson. But his MMA grappling, he's an Olympic level wrestler. He never really implemented it in MMA. Robert, by the way, I'm being completely objective here. Yoel is my favorite fighter of all time. Rob is my favorite fighter right now. But Rob's MMA grappling is severely overrated as well. Because he's doing it to a lot of these guys where he can get them down, but he has no top control, no ground and pound, no finishing ability. Marvin Vettori, same thing. Ankalaev doesn't have it either, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I think my point is Ankalaev is as good as anybody he's faced in MMA grappling. And he hasn't beaten him yet. So your point's correct. It's not like he's beaten Ankalaev. If he was to beat Ankalaev, I think that would then wipe that argument out as well.
Yeah.
If he hasn't.
Well, it's all subjective, and that's what we're here for. Different ways of looking at it, and I'm sure your followers will also be able to see. I'm going to post this on my feed as well. So, for those of you watching this video now, this is Adil. He runs Modern Combat. That's his channel, and we're going to be doing more of these in the coming weeks ahead. So,
I appreciate you so much, bro.
No worries, bro. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely, and. Well, I don't have a big fan base or anything, but do you want to put your
thank you for that, man. I appreciate that. So it's Elusive 2.0, Raf, that's the handle across everywhere. And this should hopefully be the first of many to come. So thank you for having me. And see you guys soon.
Absolutely.